I know.
Okay, and we're live.
All right, today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025, and this is a policy committee meeting. And the meeting is called to order at 5:02. And was the meeting properly posted? Yes, sir. All right, thank you. And I need a motion to approve the January 16th, 2025 policy committee meeting, minutes.
I'll make up the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any comments, concerns at all? So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on to our first,
Yep, school safety plans, I believe, right?
sorry.
So this is a current policy, 442.5, and you can see that X'd out here. This will be the final reading before we take it to the next level. So this is the only one that is up for action. So we've looked at this before, and Mr. Halverson has been through this and worked with the police department, a lot of different safety organizations in the county. This is last updated in 2013, meaning 442.5. The actual policy numbering is gonna be policy 723, which is school safety plans. So all of these aspects, meaning the district shall develop and maintain a school safety plan that includes all of the following. We are doing or have done all of this. Our safety plan is completely updated, completely approved, and everything has been signed by all the different law enforcement agencies, so we're excited to be at that point. So the periodic updating, review, and board approval of the school safety plan, it says every 3 years, but I know Mr. Halverson will be bringing that more regularly through the Student Services Committee. Go
So
ahead.
that's why I just wanted to ask, was that 3 years, like a statute or
Yes.
something? Okay.
Yes.
Alright.
So, and some people stick to the 3 years, and we're definitely gonna be, his plan is to do it yearly. Is to be bringing the plan yearly through the Student Services Committee and to the whole board if that's what the board chooses. Safety plan training, we're actually heavily into this right now. That'll be part of Mr. Halverson's presentation on Monday with that aspect of the strategic plan. We're actually to the point with our safety plan training that we are at tabletop exercises in multiple buildings already. And he has the plans laid out for all of them, timelines. That's something that this district, at least to my understanding, has not done before, or at least not recently at all. So we're heavily into that. Dissemination of the district school safety plan is complete, actually. That is also done, which is one of the reasons why the timing is very good. Most of all of that work was a lot of heavy work from July, actually June, to now with this. Questions?
It's definitely more comprehensive than what we had in the past, but obviously, we never had a director of student services and, school safety, so it makes sense for it to be a little bit more robust than what we've had previously, so I like how it's all broken down and delineated, so, yeah, not a problem.
Okay,
Yep, I think it looks good, it's thorough, to the point.
I like it.
all right.
So the next is policy 447, student discipline. I wanted to ask first.
Yep.
Did we ever have this policy before, or is this a new one that you're actually?
Yeah, the next two are
Okay.
actually new, and it should be in the book.
Okay.
And as we're kind of working backward with things, some of these policies, like policy 448, it just shouldn't exist, but I think you'll understand why once we jump into this a little bit.
Yeah.
The student discipline piece, this will be policy 447, you can see the next one, which is 447.1. They're very linked, and we'll be deleting 448, which actually shouldn't be there. I mean, there's some words there that it shouldn't be there. You can see it right in 447.1, students shall not be subjected to corporal punishment in any form. That's actually in the statutes, so
You don't
So
need a
instead of getting rid
specific
of-
one.
So just again, for continuity of what we've done in the past, so should we just do the 447.1 as a replacement to the 448?
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to give a general overview
Okay.
of why I'm connecting 447 and 447.1. Because 447.1 is a replacement for 448.
Okay.
448 was misnumbered, and it's very much linked to student discipline, which is why the state numbering is like it is. So when it comes to this policy, it's very straightforward. Positive learning environment, building principals, teachers, and other designated staff shall be authorized to discipline students for misconduct in accordance with board policy and school rules. It talks about dignity of students, which is importance and seriousness of the infraction. And then it talks about it's unlawful to discriminate in disciplinary actions, some basics, but also some statute references about students with individualized education programs and referencing that statute. Because there's statute that specifically talk about that. It's one thing I very much like about these linked policies. Student discrimination is linked in terms of statute reference. And then you can see 118.31, if you drop down to section 118.31 of the state statutes, talks about staff use of physical force, and then semicolon, corporal punishment prohibited. Okay, it's an important point in statute 118.31. Kind of speaks to the replacement of 448 with 447.1, just in statute. And this talks about school boards' power with respect to discipline of students, but also the Wisconsin Administrative Code. So 447 is pretty close to the way that it needs to be.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question about this one? Just reading it, it stands out to me, and correct me, because maybe it doesn't need to be in it, or where would it be? I was searching the policies and I didn't quite know, but where's citing about like proper parent notification about disciplinary
Mhm.
issues,
Yeah.
whether how minor or how major, you know?
You know, I can get back to you on that. That's actually good follow-up with this.
That's what actually was, kind of alluded to a question that I was gonna have. Does this have like procedures
Yes.
with it?
So there's
that's-
others for suspensions and
Okay,
expulsions. That's not listed here, we're leaving that, we have a suspension and expulsion policy.
Okay,
That is something that, actually it's down on letter D. So we'll be coming to suspensions and expulsions.
Okay.
So there'll be some changes with that as well.
so this is just a broad overview of just the policy.
Yeah,
So letter D, they're kind of, they all go together, which is why, except for fund balance, it's not connected at all.
Yeah.
So the very last one is not connected at all. But letter B, C, and D are all very, they're more of a unit to understanding. Mr. Halverson in student services has bumped into some issues with our existing, some changes that are necessary with our existing suspension and expulsion policies, more tweaks. So like I said, this is a first reading, but I am gonna write a note about, it really, you mean parent notification? Is that what you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
like just
Yeah.
what the standard is,
Yep.
or if it is necessary to put in policy versus, I don't know, you know.
Or procedure,
I'm
Yeah.
thinking more procedure,
Right,
right?
and yeah, that's what I mean, or like, you know,
parent notification.
what, yeah, I think it should be something, I mean, I'm just curious.
Somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's get to that,
Okay.
cause that is something that comes up often. So that's student discipline. The use of force piece, I referenced the statute on 447, which is specifically why we're replacing 448 with 447.1 because of statute 118.31. So I've heard a few things that maybe it just, I don't see that it should not be there. And it should be in this format, and then you can see the same statute cited. But it also cites removal from class and then IEP duties. So some of this very much gets in to incidental, minor, or reasonable. It talks about notifying parents and guardians of the students involved in taking proper disciplinary action against the offender. So that's in the second last paragraph. in this instance. So we'll get to that. So that partially answers your question,
Sure.
but that's not comprehensive answer.
Yeah.
It answers it specifically for this, that is written in policy. So in this policy, 448, it eventually, once we replace it with 447, it just won't exist, right? And it shouldn't be there. Our current suspension and expulsion policy is listed as 448.2. Listed in our current book is 448.2. So there's a policy and procedure there for suspension and expulsion. So in those situations, we bumped into some incidences. Students may not be offered to volunteer participate in a particular sport program or intervention. This talks about notice to parents. Shall be administered in accordance with state statutes. Same thing with compliance and school rules. But we can change this as needed when we come to action at the next policy committee meeting. I just wanted to get this out in terms of, if you jump to the second page, the legal references for expulsion. We don't expel many students in the school district in Menominee Falls. That's not really part of our culture, but it does happen occasionally, and it's important to have it scripted what that means. Conduct at school and under supervision of a school and authority, is an expellable offense. Number one is repeated refusal to follow school rules. And those are in statute. So when I reference it verbally, those things are also in statute 1 through 5.
So I had a question because I compared it to the old policy
Right.
in which it delineated that in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension.
Yes.
Is there?
There actually
why-
shouldn't be any delineation
Okay.
because you're taking liberty away in each situation. An in-school suspension and an out-of-school suspension, I know that it's different to families, but from a legal perspective, you're still taking a liberty away from them, meaning, let's say they're restricted for the entire day with an in-school suspension. According to the letter of the law, it's very similar, if not, there's very legally more similarities between ISS and OSS. Detentions are different because, you're usually not removing somebody from a classroom. If you're doing a lunch detention, that's not a class. They're not being removed from a class. Or if
So
a
I think-
detention is after school, they're not missing a class.
So I think my question lies is because obviously when I look at policies, it's for the community, parents to actually be able to read and understand.
Yes,
So as a parent, I was looking at the older version and it actually explains, or maybe this goes in policy or procedure aspect of it.
I think it's the procedure.
Okay, because it explains, and I like this part, that in-school suspension, that pupils are assigned to an in-school suspension will be provided access to their class assignments, other classwork and completing, and I think that this information is important for parents to be able to actually understand.
To reference, yeah,
And
because
reference
if I
what
go
an
to a
in-school-
policy.
Yeah, in school versus an out-of-school suspension, even though administratively, you explained it in the policy, that makes sense, but I was just wondering if that part of it or some part of that
So it could be
information
outlined
should
like
be-
in procedure.
Yeah, in a procedure so parents would be able to
I mean,
actually
granted,
see.
it probably might be something in like student handbook, I don't know, but.
I
It's
just,
always good to have redundancy for
Well,
some things.
Yeah, so
It's a good point.
explain for like the average parent who doesn't really know what the delineation is, what is entailed of their child when there's an in-school versus out-of-school suspension, does their homework, et cetera,
Right,
that
and
we
like
actually
where
have
I'm
it
gonna
somewhere.
resource it, I wanna,
That's
I
the
wanna
only thing.
reference it somewhere, so.
We can, I think that delineation actually comes in 448.2, the policy, not the procedure. I actually think that comes in where they delineate it on page 1 of the existing policy. At the bottom, they actually do a pretty good job
You mean the old one?
of the old one.
Yeah, that's why I printed it and I read it and I said, oh, I kind of like that right there, that
Yeah.
explains to a parent as to what would occur if their child had an in-school versus an out-of-school homework, the credits for their work. I
You
think
know, and I'm sure like in that situation, the principal is notifying the parents saying,
But I think it's
this is
backup,
what's occur, right,
No,
exactly,
like, I
no, I
think
agree.
it's good for us to have it in there.
So what I will do before we bring it back to the next meeting is I will merge that in.
Mhm.
I'm gonna merge it in and put it in and actually delineate
Okay.
in this PRG base.
Okay,
I'll delineate between suspension, in-school and out-of-school suspension, which is what we're essentially talking about, and just use the clarity that's already here. Cause I don't, that doesn't change the nature of
Okay,
everything
got it.
else.
yeah, I'm just thinking more of like informational,
Yeah,
for parents to understand better.
and I don't believe a procedure is gonna be necessary.
Okay.
Just in talking to Mr. Halverson, who really is working with the principals more in that realm. Ready to move on to fund balance?
You have another question?
And yeah, if you have another question, please go ahead. That dog in training is just amazing, just amazing,
Well, hence a service dog, right?
right?
Okay, and I think what you have down here, just with the idea that individuals with disabilities have right here, that's sufficient, reference to, right? Cause the old one has all suspensions and expulsions would adhere to state, federal, legal requirements for pupils with identified disabilities under the IDEA section 501. So
Yeah, I
that
mean,
would be the
essentially,
same.
essentially, that is, it's a broad statement, but I'll give you an example of what that is implicating. So if a special education student is gonna be expelled, you have to do something called a manifestation determination. So that's not verbalized in there, but that's what that is referencing, is there's some different protocols that need to be followed in that instance. And if we're moving on to fund balance,
Yes, sir.
Sure.
okay, and Caitlin was not able to be here, she wanted to be, and she asked me to apologize on her behalf, but she and I have worked on this, and everything in 662.3, which will become the numbering, so our existing 654, she did write up a little summary here, which I'll read.
Oh, okay.
And I think you all have that, Isabella just handed that out for you. So this little summary is what Caitlin would have, she's high level with these sorts of things but I'll just run through it. She wrote it up for everybody and I'll verbalize it. So our existing policy is 654 for fund balance. The new policy maintains the target of 25%, so that's not changing. So the fund balance target is 25%. So the new policy does not change the way we do any of our business. We already utilize the various classifications of fund balance, which is represented in our financial statements. The definitions of fund balance classifications are simply the DPI definitions. It's an important point. We don't need them in policy, but the WASB recommends, so we'll accept them into our new policy. So that's the definitions of fund balance classifications are simply the DPI definitions. And that's on number 1 of the new version. It goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of fund balance. So that is just DPI language, non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, and unassigned fund balance. It's a specificity that exists at the DPI and it's recommended it be in here. It doesn't change anything in terms of our fund balance itself, right? So that's an important point that Caitlin asked that I convey.
So she'll be adding the 25% in here, like under 4?
Yes,
Oh,
it's actually over
item 4.
on,
4.
It'll be under number
Where
4.
it's underlined.
It'll be
Okay,
under
I was
number, it'll be under number 4.
Okay,
So
That's interesting.
we will keep our our new 662.3, which will be the new fund balance policy, we'll keep the number the same as the old, meaning
The
the
25%.
minimum fund balance. She also wanted me to, so 25% remains our target. We are approximately at 32% fund balance right now. All right, our target is 25. Caitlin, in her detailed work and her always being so dialed in terms of these are publicly available information about area district fund balance policy minimums for the board to be aware of. Elmbrook 15%, Hamilton 18%, Pewaukee 15%, Germantown 17%, Kettle Moraine has no minimum stated, at least publicly. That doesn't mean their fund balances are this,
right.
That's their minimums.
that's what's listed for their minimums, okay? But I think that's good information for the board, actually, it's really good information for the board and the public to have, that our fund balance allows us, you know, in a medium-sized district to make payroll without borrowing. And to pay for HVAC systems that break at the middle school to the tune of
Right.
1.3 million, it allows us to do that as well.
Yeah.
You know, and other things, but those are just examples.
So, and I'm seeing these other districts are under 20%. I mean, is there any consideration that, you know, looking at our CIP for the next upcoming year, there's a lot of projects on there, you know, the tunes of millions of dollars. Would we, I mean, is there a reason why we can't go to 20%, maybe take some out and start funding some of those CIP initiatives?
That's always the authority that the board has, and I think you probably meant 30%, not 20%.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
yeah,
So just to, you know, a lot of different numbers from different districts here,
yes.
but that's always the authority that the board has to utilize fund balance. You wanna be cautious with it, but we're in an extremely, we're being extremely fiscally conservative right now with all of our projections.
Yeah,
We're in a
sure.
healthy spot financially. I think these comparables are good. Once again, this is what's listed publicly. That
Right.
doesn't mean
Sure.
that each, I'm willing to bet that their fund balances are higher than that. Those are just minimums that they have written in.
Yeah.
But that's worth thinking about. Not changing anything, we're not recommending changing anything with respect to 25%. Leave it at 25%.
Right.
But we are at about 32%.
I'd be really curious, not all of them, to know what their actual fund balance is, like Germantown, for example.
Oh, that's
That's all
very,
public information.
Right, but I mean,
it's a good
I'm not
question
going
for,
to dig it up.
maybe a good question for Caitlin on
Yeah.
Monday. I can-
Just not all of them necessarily,
Yeah.
like one or two. I'm just curious.
Or like the comparables.
Yeah,
I'm just kinda curious as to what's the rationale of like why other districts pose their minimum to be in the teens or under 20% and we have established it at 25. I mean, is there a rationale behind that?
I think that it's, you know, and I don't wanna speak for other elected people, other elected officials in other districts, or even for you, but my guess is that they don't want to restrict themselves. Because if you're gonna go below 25% in this district, you know, the policy exists, you can go below 25%, but there's, you know, there's certain systems and rules that you have to follow to say, you know, you have to post that you're, you know, do that, and, you know, that's part of this policy as well. It's
Yeah.
extremely transparent, and with respect to, for example, let me just reference that specifically the way that it's written, that it's number 2 on the back of page 662.3, official board action shall be required to commit the use of fund balance resources for a specific purpose or modify or remove that commitment. And we have done that.
Yeah.
When we've used fund balance, you go to the board and you make that commitment. So if you drop down to number 4, this fund balance is intended to be used for purposes including cash flow management, reducing the need for short-term borrowing, safeguarding against unexpected expenses or unrealized revenues, and maintaining a high credit rating for the district. That is very true. Now, when it talks about above the max, and the board shall consider committing a portion of that fund balance for a specific purpose or reducing the subsequent year's tax levy. Essentially, what this is all saying is that if you're gonna use the fund balance, you can go below 25, you just have to be make sure that, not that we wouldn't do it, but do the same thing you would do if you're using 1% of it, you know, sort of thing, so.
Right.
I think it's good, but I think this additional sheet she wrote up, it kind of makes you think a little bit. But I think some people kept their minimums lower to give themselves more flexibility.
Some wiggle room, yeah.
So to give themselves a little bit more flexibility, that's just me thinking out loud, but I think that's a good question for Caitlin on Monday. Because Monday is gonna be big picture in that particular committee, we're gonna be looking at dollars and cents over the next 3 years, or next 2 years for sure. She has several different projections, a good written, a write-up of where we're at, you know, I don't wanna, you know, steal any thunder, but, you know, I've seen everything and she'll post it, I think tomorrow, if it's not posted already, probably tomorrow, for Monday, and that's the committee, the finance committee meeting before the board meeting on Monday. So we're starting to get into some of the heavy lift with money, staffing, and staffing plans in the next several meetings, next 3 meetings, 4 meetings.
Alright, I think that is it for our discussion items for our action. We just have the one, the school safety.
You did good on the fund balance, by the way. Caitlin will be proud.
I'll need a motion to replace the current policy 442.5 with a new policy 723 as presented.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any last questions, comments, all?
No. That's great.
Alright, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we can move on to our future agenda items. I think we're still working on a few.
Yeah, they're all right in front of you here, so those will all be moved to action. I have some notes about some of the changes, and I'll work with Mr. Halverson on that, just to make sure that we're dialed in on the specific, because most of them are student discipline, parent notification guidelines for 447, but also the adding in in-school suspension and delineating the difference, pulling some of the specificity out of our existing policy and moving it into the new policy for that.
Alright, pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
No.
Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.